Good afternoon, KCAA listeners, and good afternoon and good evening to those listening to us on the live stream link. This is the Kathleen Wells Show. I'm Kathleen, your host, and today my guest is historian Stephen Sniegoski. I'm absolutely delighted to have him as a guest. I've read many of his articles, and I'm very impressed with his wealth of information. Today is 9/11, September 11th, and on the eve of the anniversary of 9/11, 9/11 is a date that will be imprinted on the minds of most Americans forever. Well, on the eve of that date, President Obama delivered a speech to the nation as to why we should surgically attack. That's supposed to be significant, surgically attack. Because we all know there's no collateral damage with a surgical attack. Well, he delivered a speech last night as to why we should surgically attack Syria. The question is that right or wrong? And that's what we're going to explore with Stephen later on. But let me first say that this question about a strike on Syria, it's uncertain. In fact, in President Obama's speech, he sort of gave the impression or insinuated or maybe even explicitly stated that the decision to strike is on pause. However, I just heard a report that Harry Reid is asking the Congress to grant, just today, Harry Reid is asking the Congress to grant President Obama authorization to execute a strike on Syria. So let me tell you something about Stephen before I bring him on. As I said, he is a historian, and he's also a foreign policy expert. He's the author of the book, The Transparent Cabal, The Neoconservative Agenda, War in the Middle East, and the National Interest of Israel. His first major article on the subject was titled The War on Iraq, Conceived in Israel. And he wrote this piece, The War in Iraq Conceived in Israel. He wrote this piece on February 10th, 2003, a month before the Americans before we actually attacked Iraq. So essentially, he knows what he's talking about. And he's a wonderful person for us to get informed about this information. Because you know what? We can't rely on the mainstream media to give us the 411, to give us the exact information that we need to make an informed decision. So the question on the table is a strike on Syria off the table or on the table? And that's what we're going to ask Stephen. So Stephen, welcome to the Kathleen Wells Show.
Well, thank you very much for having me on, and thank you for your favorable presentation of me. I might add, though, what I write is really nothing hidden to anyone. It's the neoconservatives have been quite out in the open. Maybe some of their I don't think their connections to Israel have been hidden either. So it's pretty out in the open. But it's sort of a taboo subject in America to imply that Americans of a Jewish background would actually be pro-Israel and would actually influence American foreign policy. So I think almost everyone sees it, but people who are in pretty good positions realize that mentioning it would not be career enhancing.
It would not be career enhancing. So much has changed in the last 48 to 72 hours. And after hearing Harry Reid insist that Congress give President Obama the authorization, I want to say things have sort of like flipped again since President Obama's speech last night. So President Obama said in his speech last night that he had resisted military action up until August 21st when 1,000 men, women, and children were gassed by the Assad regime. He also said that the use of chemical weapons is a crime against humanity, but that not action would be aimed at removing the regime or changing the overall strategic dynamic on the ongoing civil war. But the goal was basically to deter Assad from resorting to using chemical weapons again, and that basically a strike would be a strictly punitive strike in retaliation for the Assad regime's use of chemical weapons against civilians. So my question to you, Stephen, is did you hear President Obama's speech? And if you did,
I did hear his speech, and of course, his presentation is quite different from what the neoconservatives expect. You know, they want a wider world war in which the United States would aid the rebels, which would get rid of Assad, because basically Assad is an enemy of Israel's because he's a supporter of Iran, and he provides a conduit for Iranian weapons going to Hezbollah, and I believe to a lesser extent Hamas. And also, the idea would be if Iran would intervene, then the war would be against Iran, so then Israel's major enemy would be eliminated. So the essence is that their view of what would transpire is quite different from what Obama at least describes. They believe, perhaps correctly, that all wars can very easily become much more violent than are initially intended. We can look at many wars like World War I, for instance. That wasn't intended to be the bloodbath that emerged. This could quite likely lead to that too. At least certainly the neocons would like it to be so.
Okay, so we've gotten a little bit ahead of ourselves because I want you have written a piece recently and it's titled Obama, Neoconservatives and U.S. Military Intervention in Syria. Explain to listeners who are the neocons and why are they interested in something different, a war more expanded than what President Obama described last night in his speech to the American people?
Well, just quickly, the neoconservatives emerged in the early 1970s. Many of these people, we call them neoconservatives because many had earlier been on the left, at least the original ones, like Irving Kristol and Norman Podhoretz. On the left, then they became sort of a regular American liberals, and then they saw American liberalism as being not sufficiently supportive of Israel. They saw many American liberals becoming supportive of third world regimes, and of course the Palestinians would fit into that category. Also, they saw certain problems in the United States with a threat to American Jews, with things like affirmative action, which they thought might be a threat to Jewish predominance in various areas. So they turned away from, let's say, American liberalism. Throughout sort of the 1970s, they were first picking sort of more conservative Democrats like Moynihan. Then they moved all the way to the Republican Party with Reagan in 1980, and right from the very beginning gained a pretty good position within the Reagan administration because American conservatives were very happy to pick them up because they were more acceptable in the mainstream. So from then on, they've been, have had their ups and downs. They were most influential in the Bush administration, where I maintain they were the major influence in leading the United States into the war on Iraq, though, as I point out in my book, Iraq was only to be a first step to the reconfiguration of the entire Middle East. And as I say, in the interest of Israel, when I write about the neocons, they are Jewish, they are actually sympathetic to the interest of Israel, and they basically see the interest of Israel and the United States as coinciding, and they do say that openly. I believe, of course, that their view of American foreign policy is shaped by their identification with Israel, which is the Jewish state.
Okay, so you specifically also wrote in your piece that I mentioned the name, you specifically wrote that members have literally sent, in fact, a letter was sent to President Obama on August 27th rather, from, let's see, what is his name? Let's see, which guy was this? The Neoconservative Policy Initiative wrote a letter urging him to go far beyond limited airstrikes and called on the president to provide vetted moderate elements of Syrians' armed opposition with the military support necessary to strike regime units armed with chemical weapons. Furthermore, the United States and other willing nations should consider direct military strikes against the pillars of the Assad regime. So, are the neocons winning or not is the question. Are they going to get their way?
Well, I certainly they don't want this move, or I haven't looked over everything. I think they're fearful of bringing in Russia, and that peace might prevail. But that's not. I don't think that's a certainty. But any movement toward peace, they would see as appeasement. That there's a need for. They want that actually you have to do more than just have Assad give up his chemical weapons. It's essential to remove him because he's a tyrant, because he himself allegedly is somehow a danger to peace in the Middle East. But, of course, we can see I don't think anyone can see how he threatens America, but yes, he does threaten Israel, not simply because of any power he has, but because of the support he provides to Iran, which is Israel's major enemy, which doesn't threaten to overwhelm Israel in a battle, but does provide support to the resistance to Israel, such as Hezbollah and Hamas, and moral support, too.
But, something that you said, Stephen, you say that you think most Americans, what are there, 301 Americans?
Million or so.
But, yeah, what did I say?
301, I think. But you meant million. I'm sure you meant million. I just added that. I'm not trying to chide you. I've said that. I'm sure you're referring to million.
Right.
I understood what you were getting at.
Right. 301 million Americans, and you say most are aware of the fact that regarding our foreign policy in the Middle East, it is being influenced.
Oh, I don't think Americans realize that at all. No.
Oh, well, what were you saying initially?
I'd say many more knowledgeable people.
Oh,
they're more knowledgeable people than me who keep their mouths shut.
Right, but
I think the late Helen Thomas said everybody in Washington knows the power of the Israel lobby, but they never mention it. When Mearsheimer and Walt, with their book, The Israel Lobby, came out, we had all kinds of, elitists parading forth saying they'd never heard of anything like that. They'd never heard of any Israel lobby ever influencing American policy. So, that you need, I think it's been said that the Israel lobby is so powerful that you cannot mention that you can't mention it's powerful. And, of course, the neocons, I would say, would be one segment of this Israel lobby, a more harder line segment. Others are pro-Israel. The neocons have actually been aggressively pro-Israel, in line with with the Likudnik, the right-wing Israelis, such as Netanyahu.
Well, I just saw a piece that said that the Anti-Defamation League has come out, the ADL has come out in support of a strike against Syria also.
Yeah, so even in this case, it looks like it's brought down people who are even not quite as hard line as the neocons.
Okay, so I want to ask you a question. How you have gotten access to and or read letters that were given directly to President Obama from these neoconservatives?
Yeah, these were public letters.
They're public.
They're public letters. Yeah. These are meant for everyone, not just for they're a letter to the president, but they're sent out to the press, so we can read them.
So everyone
we all know their positions, but and I don't think anybody denies their heart or line, but they're frequently, most people will deny both their influence and their connection to Israel. And let me just make one thing as clear as I can. I'm not saying they can run things on their own, but they are in the forefront of pushing these positions, and at times they're able to find allies from other elements of American society who may not even realize the significance of Israel in all of this. So I would say in the current fight, I mentioned the what I would call the quote unquote humanitarian liberals have loomed large. They're fighting for because Assad has been demonized. He's the worst evil that currently exists in the world until a new one is quickly found. And also the foreign policy elite, once the gassing took place and people started screaming and Obama's red line was purportedly violated, they are all concerned about American prestige. America has to be the primary power in the world, or at least a very influential one. And certainly, if it can't afford to lose its credibility. So for the purpose of credibility, they are emphasizing intervention, though they are quite willing to accept, as Brzezinski has pointed out, a more moderate type of intervention that would bring everyone together. For Brzezinski, he even includes Iran, which certainly would differ from the neocons.
Well, now, Obama is attempting to weasel out of this red line verbiage. He's saying that the international community has actually set the norm, set the standard.
Yes, we shouldn't look at him. It's almost anybody but him. But the problem is, I would say he could have weaseled out better. He didn't have to actually tell a lie. I guess that's the easiest thing to do. When he made that red line, as far as I know, as far as I could tell from my reading, he never really said what he was going to do. He really never said, and that means war. He implied it meant something stronger, but he really never specifically said it was war. So he could have weaseled out of it better, I think, than he did, but maybe it wouldn't have been as gone over as well, or it didn't seem to go over with anybody. So I don't know why he chose that. Maybe if a lie is handy, politicians generally pick that even over the truth.
Well, Secretary of State John Kerry has denied that the action would be classified as a war.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, it really wouldn't be a war. Then he said it would be the incredibly small, I guess, was just a military action. Yes, the other type, he did say it would not be not really a war. Just like our action in Libya, that really didn't have anything to do with the War Powers Act or anything.
But Obama said it will be more than a pinpoint or a prick or whatever.
Yes, of course. Pinpricks are pretty small, aren't they?
But no boots on the ground.
Didn't say any. Do the military always wear? Do they always wear boots still? We have to parse things closely.
Yes, it's very important. Well, why don't we take a break? And are you open to taking questions from
Yes,
listeners?
I'd be very willing to do so.
Okay, so we're going to take a break. And, Mia, let me ask you, what is the call-in number? I know it was temporarily changed for today.
Yes, the call-in number is 909-888-5224.
522. So the call-in number, it's not the toll-free number. We have a different number just for today because of some snafu. The call-in number is not toll-free. It's 909-888-5524. Did I say that right, Mia?
Close, 5224.
5224. That's not toll-free, 909-888-5524. 5224. It's not toll-free because our lines, there's a snafu. If you have questions for Stephen regarding our strike on Syria, anything about the neoconservatives, please feel free to call in. We're going to take a break right now, and we'll be right back. Welcome back. This is the Kathleen Wells Show, and my guest today is Stephen Sniegoski, and we're talking about President Obama's speech last night regarding a strike on Syria. and the influence of the neoconservatives. So, Stephen, actually, I want to say first, I heard the advertisement giving out the call-in number, and that's the wrong number just for today. If you'd like to call in with a question for Stephen, that number is 909-888-5224. So, Stephen, my question to you, if you had a crystal ball, what do you foresee happening in the next few days?
I'm a little weak on predicting the future. I'm able to look at the past. Sometimes, when the neocons were pushing Bush, I knew they had us going to war then. This time, war, Obama doesn't really, I'm not sure, he's sort of wavering on all of this. I'm not sure his heart was in the war.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, he doesn't really want to stand up to the war hawks. He feels he has to do what in this case, it seems like a large number of the elite, seem to move to at least an anti-Assad position. It wasn't simply the neocons, and they won over sort of respectable humanitarian and also sort of respectable liberals who would be in the media, that would, as opposed to sort of the grassroots liberals, sort of like in more so even than in 2004 when Kerry ended up being pro-war, the candidate that was chosen, but something like about 95% or so of the Democratic delegates, I would say more of the grassroots liberals, were had been against the war in Iraq. But you always, even then, you had certain liberals who seemed to at least claim to believe that America would bring about democracy for Iraq, which would spread throughout all of the Middle East, and everything would be better, and the people would be free, and everything would sort of be great in the future, thanks to the efforts of America. That maybe America had been bad for at least the latter part of the Cold War in fighting progressives, but now America could be in the forefront of advancing progressive interests. I think the New Republic would sort of fit into that category.
Well, it's interesting how liberals use these humanitarian, as you mentioned, humanitarian reasons. Oh, my God, these children have been gassed. And, in fact, I find when I say to people, to so-called liberals, that I'm opposed to a strike in Syria, they say, well, you're an apologist for the Assad regime. Haven't you seen the people, the children that he has gassed? And I want to ask them, haven't you seen the children that have suffered from Operation Cast Lead in Gaza?
Well, they probably haven't.
Well, why do we care more about Syrian children than
Because, first of all, the media is putting it on day after day. And we go about the children. He killed children. In other words, we get the impression that somehow Assad is so bad he really used that gas intentionally to kill children. Not even that it could have been an accident, but that it really was intended to hit children because he's just a nefarious, horrible individual.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, we're not apologists for Assad regime because I've heard bad things, but
No. I'm not saying no.
Right.
I would not say. I don't think he's a good. But I'm not sure.
Right.
That people who have been around the block a few times should be, especially those associated with the United States government, should be at any all shocked, about the use of poison gas. First of all, the United States aided Saddam in the 1980s in his use of poisonous gas against Iran. Because the United States, saw Iran to be a greater danger than Iraq, and this was under Reagan. The United States helped to provided them information, how to, which they used to direct their gas attacks. Also, apparently, they got some of their the chemicals needed for their poisonous gas from the United States. And of course, the other thing would be Israel itself is claimed, and by various official sources, that they possess chemical weapons. And of course, while Israel was a signatory to the most recent treaty, it has not been ratified by the Knesset, so they do not legally have to, in their own law, do not have to legally abide by it. So they do have their own alleged area called Nes Ziona, some about 12 miles south of Tel Aviv, where they have factories producing chemical weapons. But I don't think there's any demand that Israel's chemical weapons be checked, much less Israel's nuclear weapons, which of course are far more powerful. Somehow Israel doesn't have to abide by or even sign that treaty, and it's perfectly okay for them to have it, but we certainly would be terrible if anybody else in the Middle East acquired them.
Well, in 1997, the U.S. joined an international agreement to prohibit the use of chemical weapons. Now, retired Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson said that the use of napalm and depleted uranium and white phosphorus are not considered chemical weapons.
Yes, that's true. There are many horrible things that the United States still uses that, are technically not against the law, but you'd say, geez, these are worse perhaps than the type of things that are prohibited. Israel, though, in fact, is actually, it is said, producing some of those weapons that are illegal.
Which is like sarin gas?
Yes, about the same things that, we attribute to, and that forms of nerve gas that we're attributing to what Assad possesses.
Well, this napalm seems pretty bad to me, and white.
Oh, napalm, yeah. So I'm not saying these other things may be quite. Some of the bombs America possesses, not simply napalm, but some of the things, some type of explosive bombs that actually pull the air out, when they explode, and collapse people's lungs and stuff, are pretty horrible.
Right.
Too. But technically there isn't anything prohibiting them.
That's not prohibited. And
but I might add that even heroic people like Winston Churchill from that 1925 outlaw agreement that outlawed chemical weapons, gas warfare, which was large scale in World War I. Churchill wanted to use poison gas toward the end of the war against the Germans, against German civilians. And he also actually played a role in the gassing of the Kurds in the 1920s. So, the idea that somehow Assad is the worst person in the world to ever do, to ever think of doing this, well, there are other pretty well-named folks in the United States, too, that have been involved in this, and Israel's hands are far from being clean here, too. So I'm not saying it's not bad, but Assad is not alone, as we're trying to act, that everyone should be so shocked about Assad, where there's more that can be done. And one could say, well, if they're going to inspect Syria for chemical weapons, why isn't the same thing done about Israel?
Well, because Israel is an ally, and see, our allies can use chemical weapons. That's the dividing line there. So
I think you've got you're picking up something there that I think is correct. It might even be more than that, because they also have a very powerful lobby here. So maybe if there wasn't the strong lobby, there would be more criticism of even an American ally. But no, this is a reason it's not treated the same way as those countries which happen to be our enemies. So we have two standards, but we act as if there's this universal...
An international standard.
Yes, well, we certainly want international law being applied to Syria, and we're very, very upset with the UN that Russia can veto it.
Mm-hmm.
However, the United States vetoes every measure in the Security Council that's directed against Israel.
So you're a historian. Tell me from a historical perspective how a surgical strike has unintended consequences.
Well, I don't know if these were all surgical strikes, but certainly many people explained were thinking in terms of small wars, like World War I. No side, they all assumed, I think Austria, when it went to, made war on Serbia, thought that this would just be a little local war in the Balkans. It would smack Serbia around, teach them a lesson, and have them get in line with, not irritate Austria, not try to support any ethnic rebellions against the Austrian Empire. Of course, and all of this snowballed into the bloodbath of World War I, and even those countries who entered it in August of 1914, Germany, and which allied with Austria, Russia, France, England, on the side of basically ended up backing little Serbia. They too felt the war would end by Christmas, of course, and all thought they had these great plans to end the war, and there wouldn't be it wouldn't be this incredibly tiny war that Kerry's referring to, but neither would it be the humongous war that it turned out to be. They thought it would be of short duration, and of course that proved not to be the case. Napoleon thought he would invade Russia. Tsar Alexander I, he'd fight like these nice, everybody stood in line, the traditional European battles. Napoleon was basically unbeatable in fighting that way because he was such a great strategist. He'd win a couple battles, and Tsar Alexander would sue for peace and turn over some little territory or make some concessions to Napoleon, or promise to abide by the refusal to sell goods to Britain. Everything would be sort of, no big deal. Of course, it turned out Alexander I was quite willing to sacrifice Moscow to be destroyed, and half of his country engaged in a scorched earth policy, and the Napoleon's army was basically, very few of them actually returned from Russia, whereas he went in with something like 600,000 men, the largest army in Europe up until that time. So that certainly, nothing like that was expected by Napoleon. Nothing like that was expected in World War I. I think you can go almost every war. So the people who start it generally think it's going to be small and they're going to win it, with a few exceptions, that is. And so this is nothing too unique, although it does seem like both Obama and Kerry are making it a little smaller than even the usual idea of a small war.
Smaller than a small war.
The usual small, most of these people who enter it assume we're going to end it pretty quickly and we're going to be victors.
Well,
that doesn't always. Sometimes that may be true. It doesn't always turn out to be the case. Frequently does not. There are many unintended consequences in war. We don't know what would happen in fighting Syria. Is Russia really going to completely stay out, or are we going to? What's Iran going to do? Is there going to be terrorism against us? Of course, from the Israeli perspective, that's exactly what they want, because they want this big war not only to knock out Assad, but ultimately to knock out Iran. So a bigger war is exactly what they want, and I think one would have to admit they generally have a better idea of what will occur in the Middle East than we do, because when we talk about things, we're also talking, most of our leaders are not really just looking at the military strategy, they are looking at the political ramifications, how this will play with the people at home. And of course, Obama has many people in the Democratic Party who just really aren't into wars. So they're not quite, Republicans, you have a number who just like, let's just clobber the other. Therefore, sort of bigger wars, even though they may not want Americans to be killed. Whereas Obama has to make it that hardly any Syrians would be killed either, though I'm not sure about animals if they would be knocked off, but maybe they'll be safe too.
Okay, we're going to take another break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about the fact that, as I said, Harry Reid has asked the Congress to give authorization to President Obama for a military strike. We're going to explore that, what that means. And also we're going to discuss this fact that Russia has offered a proposal which Syria has accepted. And what will this mean exactly? What will be the ramifications from that? So we'll be right back. Welcome back. I'm Kathleen Wells, your host, and my guest is Sniegoski. And Stephen, where can people pick up your book, The Transparent Cabal, The Neoconservative Agenda, War in the Middle East, and the National Interest of Israel? Where can they pick that book up?
Well, there's still a few hard copies available on Amazon. That would be the fundamental place. Also, there at Amazon and elsewhere there are ebooks. And also, I think if you can't afford one, I would send a PDF copy to those people. So maybe if anybody wants to contact you, Kathleen, and you could contact me, or I could send. You could send one, or I could send a copy of the PDF to them.
Well, where can people read your writings? I know you have a blog, right? Or the Catbird.
Well, most of my writings go on elsewhere. I don't really have a blog. I just put up things, but I'm a little behind there because I've been having to do so many other things. So if you look into Google and Google my name, and my last name is spelled Sniegoski. At first name Stephen, but you probably won't even need that, even though there is a Tom Sniegoski. So I'm not Tom, I'm Stephen with a PH, and you'll find, and a lot of them go on a lot of them exist at My Catbird Seat, and also Veterans Today puts up quite a few of mine.
Okay, let me ask you a question. As I said, I recently heard Senator Harry Reid ask the Congress not to undermine the president's authority to grant the military option to strike Syria.
Well, that's true, but I see that just looking at the Google, to 2 hours ago from it was decided that the Senate's formally moved away from a resolution to authorize a military strike. So he's moving on to other things.
They're moving on to other things. And
talking about energy. The energy efficiency bill is now moving to the fore.
Okay, so they're moving on, and maybe that's because of this Russian proposal. So
yes, I think that is. And the idea is that the Senate, it's going to go on other business while the diplomatic solution is pursued with Russia.
What do you think about that proposal? How is it advantageous to Russia that Syria turn over their chemical weapons to the international community or to the United States?
Well, I'm not an expert on what Mr. Putin is thinking there, but maybe he really doesn't. I mean, it's conceivable that he said this is the only way to prevent an attack. He doesn't want war. Okay, He doesn't want. He believes that this would be a broader war, which he doesn't want, in which Syria would be eliminated, and Russia does have a military base there. So he doesn't want an ally eliminated, which America would do if it really engaged in a major all-out war, and Russia itself would not. He did not intend to actually become involved in a war to try to fight the United States. Syria is not worth World War III, a global nuclear war or something. So he really wouldn't do anything, and he would see that just supporting Syria wouldn't eliminating Assad. So that would be, that would perhaps be a factor in why he would be making this decision. That giving up, and maybe he's just not big about, it would be good that these type of chemical weapons were eliminated, that he wouldn't want these used against Russian soldiers by Islamic radicals, and Russia does have to face Islamic radicals in Chechnya, so he doesn't really want to encourage it. And so he may feel that it really doesn't serve much of a value to Assad anyway, because if the United States or even Israel, if they really wanted to do something to him, he might cause a little more damage, but in the end, Assad would be destroyed. So he may see this as no great sacrifice. The thing of it is, I don't think he apparently does not want this rule that the United States is pushing, that in the UN, the agreement also would include that Chapter 7 part in which if Assad did not give up his weapons, he would be attacked. So I think Russia feels this would just be really humiliating both to Russia and to Assad, that really to give up his own sovereignty over this. That this is just too much, and then who determines whether he gives up these weapons or not?
Mm-hmm. Well,
the United States still might say, we got that law now, even if the Security Council didn't agree to do it, have another vote, with the attack on Iraq, the United States said, there's always this talk about, with Saddam, there wasn't a need for another vote when they realized it would be against them, even though there was a negative vote. They said that was enough already just to have this in place, and then the United States determined that they hadn't given up the weapons so they could use that to attack. So it would actually be given more justification for an American attack on Assad that already exists.
Exactly, because that's what happened with Gaddafi. He did turn over his chemical weapons, and yet you see he's no longer with us.
Yes, that usually happens to people who give up their weapons.
I mean, so it's a no-win situation.
It's not this is not the Garden of Eden, So that's why people have one. So if you do it and you don't have, he would need he really should have some type of promise. Well, if I give up my weapons, there should be an agreement that anybody who attacks me should be attacked. I should be defended against any attack if I give up. That should be the case. And also it should be a demand, I'm going to be inspected. All my, given the fact that my neighbors can threaten me, all my neighbors, especially that powerful one, they should be inspected too.
Yes, I hear the music. I'm going to have you on again to discuss your book, The Transparent Cabal. Thank you, Stephen, for taking the time to be my guest today. I'll definitely have you on again because you're a delightful guest, okay?
Okay, thank you very much for having me on, Kathleen.
You're very, very welcome. Thank you, Stephen. I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.